Welcome to Leadership Moments.
In every great leader's life, there are pivotal moments that shape their character, test their resilience, and awaken their vision.
Together, we'll uncover the invaluable lessons hidden within these transformative moments. Today, we have two guests for our show. First, we have Chris Burrows. Chris is the Chief Information Security Officer of Rocket Companies. Chris has more than 30 years of experience in risk management, information security, and IT operations across multiple business sectors, including government, utilities, manufacturing, healthcare, financial, and small business. He has built and implemented multiple enterprise risk-based information security programs for the past 17 years. Chris is also very active in the local security community. Our second guest is Phil Bertolini. Phil is the Senior Vice President for Government Technology, the premier event and thought leadership content provider for state and local government technology professionals. Previously, he served as Deputy County Executive and CIO for Oakland County, Michigan. During his 31-year tenure, Phil built a world-class IT organization in the second largest county in Michigan. As Oakland County CIO, he oversaw more than 150 employees, serving 1.2 million residents. In 2005, he was also promoted to Deputy County Executive, holding dual positions until his retirement. Phil's efforts earned the county national attention, winning numerous awards for technology innovation and excellence. He was named Governing Magazine's Public Official of the Year and Government Technology Magazine's Top 25 Doers, Dreamers, and Drivers. He was also honored by the President Obama White House as a champion of change. Today, we are going to talk about how to effectively transition between the public and private sector and how you can also do it too. Let's jump in. Chris and Phil, I am so excited to have both of you here today. Thank you for making this time. Phil, we had you on last season and we had a great session. And after that, you reached out to me and you said, Stacey, we should talk about the changing between public and private sector, because there's a lot of times that as a career, as a leader, you choose one sector or the other. You might change employers, you might change industries, but you typically don't change sectors. And the beautiful thing is both of you guys have done that in your careers. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So Chris, let's start with you. You actually switched back and forth a few times between public and private sector. So can you share a little bit about that story and your learnings from it?
Sure. It's great to be here. Always nice to see Phil and you, Stacey. It's a different perspective between public and private. I listed it out in preparation for this. I've had 20 different jobs for my career. And that's quite a few. And some were in public and some were in private. There's definitely some pros and cons, no doubt about it. And we'll get into those. I was reflecting on when Phil and I worked together. He knew more than I did, but we knew where every single hour was spent on every single project. And I can promise you that does not happen in private sector. I mean, it's quite the opposite. It's the squirrel syndrome. People are running everywhere, trying to do everything. And usually it's for what they're very interested in. And that's the difference in the public sector. It's the mission of the organization. And that's why I found it so fascinating and fun to work in the public sector, because it's all about the people. It's all about the mission of the organization. So I found that as something that I valued the most when I had worked in that sector.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And Phil, you worked in public sector for the majority of your career until you transitioned to private. So when you think about working for the same employer or the same industry and then the same sector for the majority of your career, our lives can be very different, and it must be unusual to be able to change that. So what are some of the learnings when you did that transition?
Stacey, thank you. Chris, it's always great to be with you. And he's right. When you're in the public sector, you're really looking at the mission and the why. We drove the why very much. Chris and I were very much partners in that, trying to always make sure there was a why for the what. And in government, that's not always easy. I mean, you know you're there to serve the people, but there's all these competing things that come along that could impact what you do. But in our organization, the Oakland County IT department, we actually worked like the private sector in a way. but make sure it was very mission driven. So that was great. I mean, I had L. Brooks Patterson was my boss for all those years and 20 years as the CIO. And I enjoyed it, but that movement to the private sector was a difficult one. And what I mean by that is that I actually had to think about what's next for me. You know, after a 31-year government career, what was I going to do next? I had to really seriously think about that. But the beauty of it was I found a place that had the same mission. The mission is to empower government and education. So I get to take what I did in the public sector and I get to put it on steroids in the private sector. And my CEO, Kathleen Robinette, it's all about serving government and serving education. And so I've had two amazing leaders in my career, and now I get to do that. But the tough part, Stacy, the mission is similar, but there is also this issue of the private sector. You are a private company and you have to survive, right? So there's a series of different steps you have to take when you get into the private sector. And I had never worked remote. So this is the interesting part. I was 31 years. I went to a government facility, or I went to my office in IT, and then all of a sudden I was working from home. I was setting up a home office, never having had one before. I was making sure I had the remote capabilities. And then if you think about it, it was prior to the pandemic. It was 2019. We weren't really hardcore on Zoom or Teams or any of those technologies. We were still doing phone conferences, right? So all that shift was all happening at the same time. And then, of course, you have the pandemic, and then the whole world went remote. I'm going to sing Chris's praises for a second here, because going from the private sector to the public sector and back to the private sector, that's a transition, right? And that's a series of transitions. But he transitioned into the public sector better than anyone I've ever worked with that came from the private sector to the public sector. He knew, he was mission driven right from the beginning. Some people come in and they don't really have that feeling when they come from the private sector. Is this really my mission? Or am I still looking for profit margin? Am I still trying to get my P&L right? All those pieces. But he got right into it. And then to be able to transition back is nothing short, but it's amazing. He's done an incredible work, and he did incredible work for the people of Oakland County.
You make me blush, Phil. Thank you for that.
Well, it's true, Chris. I mean, you think about it, and not, you know, Stacy, if I could transition a little bit here, is our interview. I will say, I don't think it was the greatest interview.
Okay, you got to tell us a little bit about that story.
Because Chris came in from the private sector, right? And I was interviewing CISOs and trying to find somebody to come in. And we were looking contractual at first, and then where would that lead? And Chris and I were talking with each other, but I don't know if we were connecting. And when we got out of the interview, I thought, I didn't sell Oakland County enough. And when he left, I was like, oh, he's going to have like 5 more interviews. This guy's like at the top of the pile. Chris can tell you, I called him right after. And he and I spent a good hour and a half on a call after the interview. And then I knew he could make that transition, and he proved me right, which I was always right, Chris?
Yes, you were. That's why we worked well together. That's a great point. And you did sell it afterwards, because that interview was 7 people around a table. And I did have an interview later that day with somebody else, so I was looking. But I'll tell you, the thing that sticks out in my mind is the impact that a government official, a government team member can have on organizations. And that's what I felt so cool about it is, yeah, we're in it to get a paycheck and live our lives with a family and do the things that we want to go do. But I will guarantee, Phil, that the people in Traverse City, the people all over the places that we touch, not only in Oakland County, they will remember you, and they will remember the things that Oakland County did for them forever. And that goes well beyond a paycheck, well beyond a bonus, well beyond a cool title. Those meetings that we had, the My GMIS meetings, and those lasting friendships have helped hundreds, if not thousands of people personally, and then millions of people across the state of Michigan, and then some.
Just to let our listeners know, for Oakland County, it's Oakland County, Michigan. It's the second largest county in the state. And what Chris is mentioning is both of you were really able to help all over the state of Michigan, even though you were essentially part of Oakland County. Would that be correct?
That is 100% correct. And we had services that we provided to the other 82 counties across the state of Michigan. And we worked on an effort called SciSafe, which was taking the NIST rules and all the different controls. And it was 300 and some in the early days, and boiling them down to like 35 to make it easy for governments to make sure they ramped up their cybersecurity. But Stacy, that's that part of that transition too. If you think about it, people coming from the private sector have an entrepreneurial bend to them, right? Which is great. We needed that in government. So the more private sector people that infuse into government, the better it is in the long run, because they bring that entrepreneurial state of mind. But that's also that part of that transition, because government isn't thinking about profit. Government is thinking about, I have X amount of services that I need to provide. I have X amount of dollars to provide them. Here's the people I need to be able to provide those services. So you have to think differently. And then there's also this adage, Stacy, that people think they can go to government, they're not going to work as hard. This is a retirement job. Chris, what did they used to say? We'd hear people say this at public meetings. The government is the working retired. And the sad part is it's not true. It is so not true. In the public sector, you can run like a private business, and you can make sure we're spending the people's dollars. And then we got to make sure we're not ending up on the front page of the paper because we failed. And there's all the pieces that go along with that. But when I transitioned to the private sector, like I said, luckily I found a mission-driven company to go with, and Kathleen Robinette being that mission-driven CEO. But it was different a little bit, because now I wasn't just trying to break even with what my efforts. Now this is a company that you need in a capitalist society. You need a company that gets money so they can survive. So you have to be able to walk both walks.
And you did a great job. I asked you many times, I'm like, Phil, what are you still doing here? I did. I'm like, you've got so many skills, and you've got a great speaker, and you know your business, and like, you can go make triple. And then once we started working together, I'm like, yes, he's here for the people. That's very admirable. I mean, that's a lot of the mindset of the government team members, especially in technology. They could go and make a little bit more, but they're there for the mission. They're there to keep 911 up. They're there to make sure that the police can respond and the ambulance can respond, and someone can get a license online rather than have to go down to the clerk's office. I mean, those things that we all benefit from.
I want to go into that a little bit, because you're right. There is this stereotype out there about people that work in the public sector, which may stop people from wanting to move from the private sector into public, or go into public at all, even in the beginning of their career. So what would you say to those people, and why would they want to choose public sector?
A couple of things. Generationally, it's different. So each generation is motivated differently. And there's really two areas that government can recruit the best right out of school, because young people today, they're different. Yes, they are. They're different. They have special skills. And what that special skill is, they want to make a difference. There's no better place to make a difference than government. None. So we need to sell that, and we need to get into the universities, and we need to be able to do that. So Stacy, that's one of the things that we do, or we did in Oakland County. We tried to show the value and what you're going to be able to bring, and what you're going to be able to do, and who you're going to be able to help. The other side of it is when they're coming out of the private sector after they've churned for years, right? They've churned, and now they want to give back to the community. There's so many incredible skill sets that they can bring back to government to benefit us. But the big thing is, it's a career. And I want people to understand that is, no matter what stage you're at, whether you're a programmer, a business analyst, a database administrator, the CIO, whatever it may be, it is a career, and it's a fulfilling career. The question is, what are you motivated by? And everybody needs to look at that, because it's not just a paycheck. It's a career, and there's a lot of whys. And Chris can talk more to the private sector than I can, because he's had so much more experience. It all depends on where you end up in the private sector. Do you feel that same sense of worth? Do you feel that same sense of, I'm able to do something to help people?
I think too, working in the government gives you more breadth of experience. When I came in, and we talked about why I came in as a contractor, because we were going to make some changes. We talked about the 27 kingdoms of Oakland County, because each division or group ran as their own function for certain things, and some of the things that we wanted to streamline and make better. So I think, as well as someone coming out new, you get experience with the health department, with the sheriff, with the clerk, with different business units. Really get a chance to get yourself immersed in the business, because that's what technology people miss is, I am a programmer, I'm going to write code. No, you're writing code to fulfill a business process. So it's hard. It's really hard for people to understand that. It took me quite a while too. I wanted to go in and do cool IT stuff, and I didn't really understand what the business was trying to drive for. It took me years really to reflect on it. And now I think people come in with a different mindset, as you said, make an impact, but make an impact across many different areas, not just producing a widget or keeping the lights on over here. It's a great opportunity for people to really get involved in and find out what they want to do.
Chris, since you have gone back and forth, in your own opinion, what do you think are pros and cons between public sector and private sector? So if someone's maybe they're early in their career, or maybe they're thinking about a transition between sectors, what are those pros and cons that maybe they could put on their list and then aligning that with their passions?
Well, pros for sure are what I just mentioned, an opportunity to, one, get experience in a lot of different areas. Two, there's so much demand and need for smart people, motivated people, the younger generation to get involved and make a community impact. I mean, that's a different mindset than maybe we had 30 years ago. The other is to bring in all that technology. I know when I was working at Oakland, we had different age brackets of people, we had different experiences. We hired an intern, a couple interns out of Michigan State, we're rock stars. And that's a great opportunity for not only the person to make an impact, but there were a couple individuals that contributed significantly, and they just figured things out. Whereas maybe the old mindset was, I don't know, I have to go ask my leader. And now it's like, there's Google, let's go figure it out. I've got friends, I'm connected, I have a network, I have the internet, things that maybe someone that's been in the county or somewhere else for 30 years, they just aren't familiar with those things. Those are the pros. I would say on the con side, the bucket of resources is smaller. It just is. I mean, we had to scratch and claw for every single nickel, and we needed to be very, very diligent on the spend. And at the same time, we had to be very, very transparent on the spend to our stakeholders. One of the cons is you don't have as much resources in the public as you do as in private, because you have investors, you got more finances and more resources to go gather more money, basically, to go get things done. Those are some of the things, the pros and the cons that I saw. What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, you nailed them. When you talk about public sector too, you really have to talk about the politics of the world too. So what happens is every time a new elected official would come in, we'd have to educate them. And we'd have to make sure that they understood what we were trying to do. And they came from all walks of life, right? So our board of commissioners were people from every different walk of life you can think of, farmers, realtors, whatever it may be. So we had to train them over and over again on what we needed to do. So that's a pro in a bit, that you're constantly educating your stakeholders. And it's a con because those elections happened every 2 years. So you'd have turnover, and so you'd have to constantly be rechurning, and you'd think you have all this great support, and then part of your support's gone. And you have to recreate it again. So there's a constant education there. And then politics get in the way too, because sometimes you're supported when the project first started, and then when you hit some bumps in the road, then the support's gone. Now what do you do, right? So you're walking that line. So there are some political issues there. Chris nailed the operational things. Money was always tight. We were always scrapping and trying to find money. We had incredible support through those years, though, to get the funds we needed. We actually got $2 million in cybersecurity funding without telling them exactly what it was for, because we couldn't, in a public meeting, say all the things that needed to be fixed, but trusted us to be able to go ahead and get that done, and we did. So the other thing, too, is the people. And someone always say to me, they go, Phil, what do you love about your job? When I was a deputy county exec and CIO, I said, the people. I just love people. I just love being with people and talking and getting done what we need to get done. They said, what's the worst part of your job? I said, the people. If we could only concentrate on technologies and some of the things that we need to do, life would have been a whole lot easier. And that was because we would get these people all trained and they'd get gobbled up by someone else. You'd get them to where you need them, and then they'd get that big offer. So at the time when I was CIO, we were thinking, what's longevity look like? Is it 10 years? Is it 8 years? And if I had them for 10, I get them into the county system and lock them in for retirement. So I almost got them, right? But now it's 3 to 5. They're lucky to keep them 3 to 5, and government has to now play that game. They have to say it's okay to have them 3 to 5, and it's okay to train them, grow them, but you're in that turnover of that 3 to 5 years, which can be a con. Now, in the private sector, what's interesting is you're getting people, but you're getting them that they really have some incredible skills. I mean, you don't have to bring new people in, train them up, and get them somewhere. In many cases, the people that are trained are coming to you. They're looking for some of those positions. So the recruitment and retention issues of government versus private sector are very different.
I think, too, you can't expect someone to stay with you for more than 3 years. I mean,
no matter what it is, right? Even private sector.
Yeah, I mean, you have to plan. When I addressed our board last year, I said, we're focusing on 2 things. 1, keeping ransomware out of our company, and 2, team member retention, because It's all about the people. I was on a panel last night, and the message was, first, it's about the people. Second, it's about the processes that you establish. And last is the technology. But people in our world always think tech, tech, tech. I can build this cool widget. I can integrate all these things. And I'm always saying that's the last part. Find a super smart, passionate person and let them go. And they'll create super great things that you can't do with technology.
And I think they're going to create a Chris GPT, and they'll just be able to ask it questions, right? They'll put in prompts, and then Chris's GPT will be able to give them all the answers they need. He's all set.
Well, the tech's there. I mean, the tech's available and it's free, so you just go use it. But the key is you need that passionate person that will do it,
right?
Not just say it. It's about doing the work, not just saying, I'm smart, I have an MBA, I have all these certs. Like, great. Now, what are you doing with it? Show me. This is what I'm looking for.
And Stacy, it's interesting too in the public sector, and this was what was different about Oakland County in many ways, is we wanted to do strategic planning. We wanted to have a mission and a vision and everything that goes on. And I'm working in eRepublic, the government technology, the company I'm in now. We have our 6 guiding values. We have, you need to be curious, creative, you need to be positive, passionate, resilient, and responsive. We worked hard at Oakland County to do those things. Governments are now learning that one of the ways to keep their people is to be very strategic and make sure they understand all the why, and that there's a future, there's a career path, there's a value proposition here. So one thing I learned, the private sector is ready to do that, not always now. Governments are saying, hey, if we're going to compete with them, we have to start adopting some of those private sector practices to make sure we're doing everything internally as government. Remember, people came to government because of benefits. In many ways, they took a lesser salary because they had very rich benefits. The days of rich benefits are gone. They're just gone. There's still some richer benefits in government, but not like it used to be. There was a severe gap between the private sector and the public sector. That's gone. And then the other reason they came to government in many ways was to be secure. If I get my job, it's going to be hard for them. They're going to have to crowbar me off my chair to get rid of me. That's not the case anymore. So what you're seeing is that the convergence of public sector and private sector. So what I'm hoping is that these transitions in the future, when someone comes out of the private sector to the public sector, or they come out of the public sector to the private sector, these transitions are cleaner, more efficient, and more real, because we're starting to see these two things converge.
I think some of the funding is coming too, right? There's some good grants, especially in the cyber world, that we've been taught. We started that 2014. I remember we posted on with the federal government on how we can get resources for local communities. Now it's 10 years later. It's finally starting to come true, but it's coming true, which is amazing. Yeah. So it's great. It takes a little bit longer, but it's great to see that the right resources are going to the right organizations.
You guys touched on recruitment, and then even Phil, you told the story when you were recruiting Chris and how you had to sell Oakland County. I love the differences of why you used to maybe go to public sector, but that might not be the case today. So what do you guys see the differences, if any, when you're recruiting and retaining that talent between sectors?
A couple things. One, no one knows what government does. So the struggle is we haven't done a really good job of educating young people early in the process about all the functions of government. They come into the interview and they hear everything and they're like, you do all that? And you actually do it with modern, up-to-date technologies? They would think they're coming in to be on a Commodore 360 or whatever, to play Pong. I mean, I don't know what they're thinking, but the point is that government does incredibly good things. They just don't know about it. The private sector is much better at marketing itself. When you have robust marketing teams and communication teams in private sector, you have teams like that in the public sector, but they're not robust. In Oakland County, we didn't have a PIO office. I think they have one now, but we didn't have one while I was there. So we functioned out of IT very much like a PIO, and we worked with the media people to try to get things done. Private sectors figured that out. They have whole teams that do nothing but that, because what they realize is a couple things. One, I can't get good people if they don't know what I do or why I do it. And two is that's how we make our money, because they need to know who we are. They need to want us to be their partner, to be able to then use us to get to their end goal, their mission or their guiding values need to come through. That's a big thing, Stacy, is that government has lagged for years in really being robust and talking and bragging about itself in ways. You'll have elected officials that'll brag about themselves, but the governments do really cool stuff, just no one knows about.
I think too, on the hooking a potential to come in early, offering those internships, both private and public, is a way to show them that we're doing great work and they can make a difference right away, because most of us want to feel like we make an impact. And for your next gig, because most people are going to be moving every 3 years, you need experience. So getting experience, whether you're an admin or writer or someone in the clerk's office, it's experience that we all look for. And that's a great way to do recruiting, is to offer someone as a sophomore in college, sophomore in high school. And we had some high schoolers come in a bit and really get some experiences to see, oh, the county is something that, one, maybe I could do dual. I could work at the county and pursue an education. It's close to my house, all these things, because I'm finding more these days, people don't want to leave. They don't want to get out of their hometown. So this is a great way to get some experience, whether it's at the county, the city, the village, and then also parlay that into while they're going to school, and maybe even get some of the schooling paid for, which that's a great attraction feature that both public and private could do.
And Stacy, to add on, because there's one big issue government has, and it has to solve it. It takes too long to hire somebody. In the private sector, we're able to move fast. I mean, if I get a candidate in that's interviewed and I like that candidate, I can offer and hire them right then. In the public sector, there's this process you have to go through. You have to have a fair and equal opening of the positions. Then you have to have an interview process. You have to interview everybody that's qualified that applied. And then you got to get to your top 5. And then you got to re-interview your top 5. You could be a month doing this. And the really good candidates out there are gone. In a month, they're gone. So we got special permission at Oakland County, because when Chris interviewed, I was able to bring him in immediately. I mean, I was able to pull that trigger immediately, because I told them if we don't, what will happen is the Chris's of the world have 5 more interviews that day. And we need to make sure that we can get them in. Private sector has figured that out, that if they want a candidate, they can aggressively go after that candidate. Now, they all have rules. Don't get me wrong. Even our company has rules on employment, but much of that takes place after you've made the offer. I got to put them through all the training, and we do reference checks and all those things, but we move much faster. It's almost similar to equating to like government procurement. Some of the problems that government has is it takes too long to buy stuff. So if we want to bring in a technology, we could be 6 months in a procurement process trying to get a technology in. In government, we could get a demo, we could kick the tires, have them give us a price, and we could say whether that's good or bad and go ahead and get it. So those are some of the big differences. And I think that's also a transition problem. Someone from private sector going to public sector gets frustrated over that. In other words, I need to bring 3 good people in. They've authorized me to hire, and it takes me a month to find them. That's frustrating. Or I need to bring in a multi-factor authentication technology, and it takes me 4 months to procure it, when I can simply just go get it. So there's so many rules and pieces. I also see that converging. So what happened during the pandemic was that governments could buy things faster than they ever bought them before. So they were able to use emergency powers and buy. You've seen some governments actually restructure their procurement to take advantage of that speed. So you are seeing some of that change, but it's still a fight. So for instance, when I transitioned from the public sector to the private sector, I could simply ask for something. And I didn't know to do that. I was doing all these big documents, and Chris knows, I used to write everything up and put a business case to it, an ROI. I could just go into the CEO's office and say, okay, I need this, and here's why, and I could get something done.
Yeah, if it wasn't part of this year's annual plan, you had to wait till next year to go put in a plan to get the funds allocated. And that was frustrating, no doubt about it, especially in this market when we can't wait 6 months. We need it 6 weeks ago, not 6 months from now.
But think about it, Stacy, AI. I'll give you a couple dates. In 2010, cloud, remember? It emerged 2009, 2010. We're still talking with governments today that are deciding whether they should go to the cloud. And it's 2024. AI comes out, and it's been out for 2 years. It's been 10 years at least. AI has been part of some of the things that we've done. But generative AI hits, and all of a sudden everybody's freaking out. They're all, what am I going to do with generative AI? We're seeing executive orders on what they should do with it. We're seeing government's legislation around AI, all this stuff, because it took ChatGPT and Google Bard and all those things that became consumer-based. All of a sudden now we got to figure out what to do with it. Government can't wait 14 years to make a decision on this. Government has to make a decision now, because the iterations of this technology are going to go so fast that if you don't get in at the right point, you're going to be lagging, you're going to be dragging. and your people are going to be expecting it. Your electeds in many ways are coming from technology backgrounds. They're going to expect it. You can't wait this long. So the speed of technology has changed the game for governments. Now, how are they going to react? Again, a guy like Chris coming into government today could make that impact, right? Because he knows how to do things right now. Think about, though, when you walk in, and Chris, when you did walk in, there were people that had been there for 30 years. So they were used to a different pace and a different cadence of how things got done. So he comes in and rips the Band-Aids off everything. And he starts telling them, you got to do it now. And they're like, oh, we don't do, that's not how we do it. We have to go through leadership group and we have to do, he's like, no, we got to do this now. There's a threat. Think about what AI is going to do to that decision-making. It's going to change everything.
One of the best meetings I was ever at was we were in the auditorium and Phil got up in front of everybody. He's like, if Chris comes to your desk and asks you to do something, stop it, whatever you're doing, and do whatever he tells you to go do. He has my ultimate permission to tell you what to do. And that was a contractor just coming in, advising the security. I thought that was great.
And it obviously was needed, right? Sometimes you need to hear from your leader that it's okay to change process. All right, well, there's that sound. It is time for our fun questions. Phil, I know you were in season 1, but we changed up the questions for season 2, but you're a little bit of a veteran at this, so we'll start with you with the question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. What is your favorite sound?
I'm going to answer this 2 ways, Stacy. One, the lack of sound, and then the sound. So there's nothing like being out in the middle of nowhere on a cold winter night when it's snowing and you hear nothing. The work that we do every day, there's so much chatter. Our email boxes and the alerts are going off and everything's going off all day long. To have that lack of sound and just have it be nothing is pretty amazing. And the sound part of it is when you're walking through it and all you hear is your footsteps. There's something very calming about that, but there's also something very surreal. It just allows you to block out the rest of the world. That's my favorite sound.
Love that. All right, Chris, what's the most unusual hobby you've ever tried or would like to try?
Good question. I'm an active person, as you know. I don't really like sitting behind desks, but unfortunately, that's part of the job is sitting behind the desks. I'm trying new things. So one thing I've done a couple times is flyboarding, and that's super cool. So basically, you get strapped into these shoes, and it attaches to a jet ski, and it propels you in the air 25, 30 feet, and you have to balance yourself. So it's a lot of physical activity. I've done it a couple times. I retired from wakeboarding because I kept hurting myself because we kept trying to do new tricks. I've succumbed to going to do surfing, which is super cool. So anything on the water, I think this is the year, though, we're going to take flyboarding to the next level. I've done it twice. It's just enough challenge where I feel it's fun, but the risk of getting hurt is less than skydiving, let's call it, something like that. So that's this year's thing is going to be the master flyboarding.
Love it. Yes, you definitely do some extreme things and try new things, which I absolutely love. So flyboarding, it's a good one. All right, I'm going to ask you guys the same question, whoever wants to go first. But if you could instantly become an expert in something, what would it be?
You go first, Chris.
Good question.
Yeah, it is a good question.
I think it would be reading people better, being an expert in communication, picking up body language, because that's what we need to do every day. Sometimes I've jumped to conclusions. With best intent, I thought something and went totally down the wrong path. And that would save me a lot of grief. It'd save the solutions. We'd get there much faster. So I'm working on being a better communicator and reading the real intent of what people are trying to convey, as well as me stating what I would like to convey to people, because it's been misinterpreted many times, whether it's in my own house or at work.
I love that. Phil.
All right. There's a couple things. One, I really enjoy numbers. I'm a numbers person. I enjoy the math side of everything. And so that has come rather easy to me, but I could master what that means. And what I mean by that is trends. When you see people that are really super good at seeing a trend happening out there and then being able to capture that and understand what that means and then be able to bring that back together with everything else. I would love to be able to someone to see the different pieces of the world better and see what those trends are. Give you a good example. I just watched the movie Dumb Money, and you got to watch it. It's all about the GameStop. And do you see some of those people saw the trends? They just could see all these things converging. And when they saw those things converging, they acted. Now, whether it was legal and all the other pieces, that's different. But I just would love to have that innate sense to where I saw 5 or 6 trends and I was able to just say, that is going to go here. That would be an excellent skill to have.
That's great. Thank you, both of you, very much. I love talking about the different sectors. I think what I got out of today was, one, you can do it. If you want to switch between sectors, it can be done. 2, maybe some of those stereotypes are really just stereotypes and not true. And there's a lot of value, whether it's public or private. There's a lot of things that are similar. You might think they're different, but really they're the same in how you lead and how you move forward. Yes, there's some nuances and some different things, but things are changing as well in both sectors that is kind of converging those even closer together. Thank you so much, both of you. Really appreciate your time today.
Stacy, thank you.
Good to see you, Phil.
Good to see you too, Chris.
And that concludes another episode of Leadership Moments. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights in what we shared today. Remember, leadership is not defined solely by titles or positions, but by the choices we make and the moments that shape us.
Embrace the challenges that come your way. They may be the very moments that propel you toward greatness. We'd love to hear your thoughts and stories as well. Connect with us on our website at leadershipmomentspodcast.com or through social media on Instagram at @tap_be the game changer.
And Stacy Castor _. Remember, your leadership moment could be just around the corner, waiting for you to seize it. This is Stacy Castor, and what doesn't challenge you won't change you.
This is Tracy Ann Palmer, and be the change you wish to see in the world.